Good morning to distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Our section will be the second one and will last for 1.5 hours, from 11:30 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So now we can address each other good morning, but when we adjourn our meeting, we will address afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam and the Vietnam Lawyer Association for organizing the 5th workshop on South China Sea, Cooperation for Regional Security and Development. And I'm sure that our workshop this time will be a productive one. I'm Phung, former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam and former Chairman of Vietnam National Boundary Commission. I have a great honor to chair this important section. The section named ASEAN and South China Sea. It is an important section because not only in the region, but over the worldwide, people are concerned, paying attention to South China Sea problem. More than any other multilateral organization, ASEAN have been and will continuously be discussing the issue. Progress has been made thanks to the effort of the ASEAN Association and each respective member states, and also thanks to the effort of dialogue partners of ASEAN Association and many other people who are concerned of the peace, stability, and cooperation in the region. But of course, there are a lot remain to be done before we can see the satisfactory, peaceful settlement of South China Sea problem. On the panelists with me today, there are distinguished panelists. Mr. Ralf Emmers from RSIS Singapore. Mr. KAVI, my long friend, coming from Bangkok. Ambassador Hasjim Djalal from Indonesia. Dr. Vifrio Vilacano Kata from the Philippines. One of our panelist is absent today because he failed to come to this workshop because of very important reason. He is Rahim Hussain, Undersecretary, Maritime Security and Sovereignty Division, Prime Minister Department of Malaysia. To start with, I'd like to invite my dear colleague, Mr. KAVI. You can take the floor.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Le Config. I'm very happy to be here. There is a Thai saying, don't teach crocodile how to swim. I am a journalist. I'm here to learn how to swim. Having said that, what I'm talking about, Thailand's role as a coordinating country, I'm talking about Thailand today because Thailand tomorrow could be a different one. Having said that, can you point out just a few points? Thailand is playing a coordinating role. The next one, please. Because I have 12 minutes, I will use it efficiently by giving all the talking points. I think it's being judged not only within ASEAN, but by international community with what would be the outcome of the current issue, the negotiating of the COC process. Thailand has been working very hard for the past 16 months, and Thailand sees its role as a bridge builder. And this is very interesting because Thailand sees itself as the neutral party, because we are not a member of conflicting party. We are a member of ASEAN, and that we have the confidence as of now from ASEAN member and also from China. Before Thailand assumed this role, Thailand has discussed among themselves and adopt a three-pronged strategy, the so-called 3C strategies, in order to make sure that China will keep engaged not only on the COC process. As a coordinating country, Thailand wants to make sure that China engage in all multi-directionals. As you know, China has been quite successful since become engaged with ASEAN in 1991 and become dialogue partner in 1996, and has come out with altogether 47 committees. The more committees you have with ASEAN means the more extensive the work and more engagement. And China also and ASEAN has 12 ministerial levels meeting annually. The three strategy is very important because Thailand will use its position as the key country in mainland Southeast Asia. I use mainland Southeast Asia very carefully because we also have maritime Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and some other country, Brunei, part of Malaysia, and also the Philippines. Thailand views its roles as part of the building of ASEAN community. In fact, when Foreign Minister Wang Yi came to Thailand and met with a senior official, he evoked the similar sentiment of community building, saying that ASEAN has its dream, just like Chinese dream. Dong Meng Meng is like Zhongguo Meng. So these two dreams are similar because they want to see a community of peace, stability, and cooperation. So I think Thailand, throughout the past 16 months, has focused on this. So any cooperative frameworks that will build up the community building will help. If you notice that since March, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Li Keqiang always emphasize the community buildings, the sort of buzzwords in all the policy. So I think that's the first strategy, hook China into this community building. Number two is related to connectivity. ASEAN has already come out with plan of connectivities 5 years now, but nobody really has come forward with the kind of concrete detail with money and with some of the concrete proposal. So in the early November, Li Keqiang came to Thailand and offered all sort of concrete proposal to build a high-speed train linking southern China through Laos and northeastern Thailand to Bangkok, Nong Khai to Bangkok. And I think if this plan come true in the future, within 7 or 8 years, you can travel by high-speed train from southern China to Bangkok, and then who knows, might go to southern Thailand, Sungai Kolok, and then proceed to KL or Singapore, because KL and Singapore also has its own high-speed project. So the connectivity is very important for China because it signifies the growing increased independence of the other ASEAN countries, particularly Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and of course Viet Nam. But one thing I need to point out here that if you notice carefully, Vietnam is a little bit way out because the connectivity is north-south corridor is focused on the so-called key quote-unquote friendly country. So if you look at the futures, China is the only one that come out with financial structure and details already as of last week, there was a big exhibition of high-speed trains by the Chinese government in Thailand in one of the train stations, just to show you that China is very serious. So connectivity will be the most important platform for China to generate an environment, whether to engage with ASEAN and increase its influence within ASEAN through connectivity. I think this you will see next year, but at the moment, Thailand still works on the detail. So you will see that bilateral engagement over connectivity will increase Chinese influence within ASEAN. The third C is, of course, the major one, the focus of today's discussion is code of conduct. And I think this will take a long time to move. But I would imagine that in the past 16 months, with Thailand as the coordinating country, I think they have made lots of progress. A lot of progress in the sense that two sides now can sit in, carry out the talk. Of course, details still have to be discussed, still continue, but I think they have established the kind of atmosphere conducive for further negotiation. And I think Thailand has used the good work that Brunei has done as chair of ASEAN this year. When Brunei took up the chair early this year, Brunei has outlined very clearly one of its three main objectives of being ASEAN chair was to reduce the tension in South China Sea. And it has done that. Sultan of Brunei, Bosana Bogia, has done that quite well. And I think Thailand has taken up that successful outcome to expand it, to find more convergent point with China. So I think from now on, you will see step-by-step and consensus approach. But then nobody knows step-by-step how long does it take. Consensus, how long does it take? Because the guidelines since 2002 take 10 years to complete. So many ASEAN see this strategy as buying time. But I don't think so. I think under the fifth generation leader, China has a new, much more dynamic, some would say much more intense and stronger positions on South China Sea. But it seems to me that under this current leadership, China is more unified domestically in the rule of law, in managing its own maritime resource and whatever related to the registration side. This is why in some of the discussion you will see that China is very confident. So I see that this strategy, when you put all three together, will engage the Chinese to engage, to look at the whole health of ASEAN-China relation. I think in the past, focus is too much on the South China Sea. This is not to criticize or devalue the predecessor of the coordinating country, but the fact that when you took the whole relation holistically, there is much more progress in this sense. So you look at the assessment of Thai role in the past 16 months. As you know, Thailand will have 36 months, only 3 years. What would be achieved in the next 20 months is very important. And the window is very clear. 20 months, I think both sides have to make substantive progress on CEC, so much so that it can progress. Why? I think Thailand is very proud of its role because it can convince China to adopt much more flexible. And I think China has done that because Thailand has generated certain good views, and also bilateral is good. There is no ill feeling. I think that is very, very important. So if you look at the Thai and you want to evaluate Thai role, pretty good. But that does not guarantee that in the next 20 months it would be able to do so, because ASEAN, as never before, each country has its own reading, its national interest and perception to protect. We are no longer in the same page as we used to do. So, but if you consider ASEAN centrality as it now is much better than last year, because ASEAN's has adopted a different position. At the moment, ASEAN still continue to find point of conversion among themselves, and hopefully these can share with China. And also what ASEAN wanted to do is to make sure that ASEAN also have their own list of commonality, which before this headline, ASEAN and China share many commonalities. So in the next 20 months, under the Thai coordinating role, I think you will see more convergence of China and ASEAN. I have no details, but I think there's 2 points that needs to ponder. When you look ahead, in the next 20 months, I think the focus on China will be to convince ASEAN that the treaty of good neighborliness, friendship, and cooperation would be a very binding, good framework for future of ASEAN. As you know, this is something new, and it came out just recently. It follows hot on heels of many other regional security framework. Of course, you probably have learned about the Russian sponsor, a much more broader Asia-Pacific security framework. But I think this framework would not survive because it contained many elements that ASEAN would not be able to agree upon. And then you also have Indonesia proposed Indo-Pacific Treaty of Friendship, Amity, and Cooperation, which also, I think, after ASEAN deliberation, it will not survive because Indonesia has not yet consulted other ASEAN members. There have been strong disagreement. So finally, I think these will be linked to the progress of COC, which China does not want to see. China already said that the progress of COC with DOC have to go together. ASEAN has been able to convince China that these two are parallel. So the next movement is that ASEAN will convince China that any successful treaty or agreement will depend on the progress of COC. And other than that, I will leave it to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. KAVI. I'd like to invite Dr. Ralf Emmers.
There we go. I would like to start by thanking the organizers. It's always a pleasure to be back in Viet Nam. I've been asked to discuss ASEAN's neutrality and unity over the South China Sea disputes. So I think it's important to start by reiterating an important fact, which is that ASEAN as an intergovernmental organization does not take a position on the sovereignty disputes. In fact, what it does is it tries very much to put sovereignty aside and to focus on conflict management, to include all the 10 Southeast Asian countries and China in the negotiation first of a DOC, as we saw in 2002, and later a COC. Now the question, of course, is what could possibly undermine this unity and centrality? And I would like to highlight two factors before discussing some potential scenarios. Those two factors, of course, are, well, first and foremost, the escalation of the situation on the ground, as we have experienced since 2007, although 2013 has so far been a better year. The second factor, of course, is rising Sino-US competition and how this has, to some extent, split the association itself. Again, in my conclusions, I will want to highlight some potential scenarios about where this unity might be going. ASEAN diplomacy was already introduced at length this morning in the opening session, so I don't have to dwell on this point. Some key documents that we're all aware of: the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, the DOC signed in 2002, and of course the guidelines for developing a code of conduct for the South China Sea, July 2011, and now the start of those consultations. That essentially constitute the institutional framework that ASEAN has relied on and built upon over the last 10 or 15 years. As indicated earlier this morning by Professor Thayer, we've had a good year of diplomacy led by ASEAN, especially in contrast to previous years, where we finally saw the progress towards consultations, although not yet the full negotiation of a COC. We've also seen new calls for peace and cooperation, as well as the joint development of resources coming out of China. So let me now focus more on the challenges and where this may take us. The challenges, the first one which needs to be highlighted clearly would be the escalation of the situation on the ground. And again, I'm not just talking about the last 12 months, but patterns that we have seen over the last 5 or 6 years. You could argue that to a large extent they are linked to an asymmetry of naval power in the South China Sea and the rise of security dilemmas. We've also seen a series of fishery incidences that have rather quickly led to diplomatic tensions. ASEAN has to a large extent thought to respond to those developments. I think here a lot of credit needs to go to Indonesia, but also, of course, as just pointed out by my friend KAVI, a lot of also needs to go to Thailand. A second challenge that we have seen in recent years has derived from rising Sino-US competition, leaving very much the ASEAN countries being a bit worried over how this rivalry could play out in its immediate region. So again, a series of incidences in recent years, from the impeccable in 2009 to others, that have, of course, left the ASEAN countries with this ultimate dilemma. What do we do if we see a further deterioration of the situation? To what extent would that undermine this attempt at remaining both united as well as neutral? ASEAN's response so far has been quite straightforward. It has argued again and again that the ASEAN countries will not choose between the two great powers. So keeping those two challenges in mind, let's now focus on what one should expect in the coming years. The first thing one should expect is that the South China Sea as a security flashpoint will not go away anytime soon. We should assume that the situation will remain volatile and possibly dangerous. A second key assumption that one can make is that a binding COC will not be completed anytime soon. Hence, we are going to see diplomatic tensions rising from time to time. Fishery incidences, as well as rising nationalism, will also continue to complicate the situation on the ground. So, let me, another factor that I think we need to take into consideration is that the ASEAN unity itself is to some extent undermined by a series of national perspectives on both the rise of China and the South China Sea disputes in particular. And candidly, I've divided the ASEAN countries into 4 groups: the assertive claimants, Philippines and Viet Nam; the passive claimants, Malaysia and Brunei; the worried non-claimants, Singapore and Indonesia; and the more passive non-claimants, although I should probably take Thailand out of that group and put them somewhere in group number 3. But in short, I think what is important is to remember that national perspectives, divergent national perspectives within the association, is making it difficult to preserve the neutrality and unity. So let me now highlight 3 possible scenarios. The first scenario, you would say, very much depends on China itself. The first scenario is where China continues to be deeply engaged with ASEAN, so that despite tensions, you do see diplomatic engagement, a focus on other issues, highlighting good relations between China and ASEAN. I think there are some signs indicating this scenario as quite possible. The recent Xi Jinping's visits to the region were, for instance, highly welcomed and overall successful. The worst scenario, of course, for this ASEAN unity would be deep tensions between the United States and China. This would automatically undermine ASEAN's ability to speak with one voice. It would also most likely divide the ASEAN countries between those adopting a balancing strategy of relying on the United States to guarantee their security, and those who would prefer to go for a bandwagoning approach vis-à-vis China, hoping that this would be the best way for them to preserve their security but also their economic prosperity. The final scenario is the one that I would consider to be most likely. It's the middle ground scenario. Here, what I'm suggesting is that, yes, China will continue to engage with ASEAN. It will continue to highlight all those other areas of cooperation where ASEAN and China clearly have convergent interests. At the same time, there will be, from time to time in particular, levels of tension over the South China Sea between China and the ASEAN countries, and some specific claimant countries in particular. At the same time, it's probably naive to expect the United States and China no longer to compete in Southeast Asia for influence. Hence, that should also be factored in as part of a middle ground scenario, where the ASEAN countries will have to preserve this sense of unity and centrality, despite the fact that the two great powers are immediately competing in their neighborhood. So as a result, the ASEAN countries are most likely to stick to a hedging strategy of wanting very much not to have to choose between the United States and China. So let me conclude, because I hope that we can have as much time as possible for Q&A. My conclusions are the following. ASEAN has focused on confidence building. It has maintained its neutrality of the sovereignty issue per se, and this is likely to remain its core strategy in the years to come. And we've heard already this morning that the COC would not in any way or form try to address the sovereignty dispute, but essentially act as a confidence-building measure, ultimately leading towards a conflict management mechanism for the South China Sea. A second conclusion is that ASEAN's model is clearly challenged by this rising tension, by this geopolitical game going on which involves the great powers, and with the risk that those great powers may ultimately compete even more fiercely in the South China Sea. So ASEAN's model ultimately depends on its ability to preserve its unity and neutrality. And this is something that ASEAN needs to be well aware of. If it were to lose that neutrality, automatically its voice in the region would be severely diminished, as well as its ability to influence regional affairs. So on that note, I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Emmers. Next, I'd like to invite Ambassador Hasjim Djalal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Friends, it's a big pleasure again to come to Hanoi to discuss the South China Sea. Now, the problem or the issues that I'm going to talk about is what we have done and what we should do. Now, the problem of the South China Sea, some people look at it from the legal perspective, some from political, and some also from the diplomatic perspective. Now, with regard to the legal perspective, what are the issues involved there, basically? At least in my mind, there are two measures to judge that. One is the customary international law, the second one, the international conventions. With regard to the customary international law, the issue of freedom of the sea came up all the time. And of course, the issue of cooperation between the states and the issue of peaceful settlement of dispute. Now, with regard to the International Convention, the most dominant one is the Law of the Sea Convention, which I understand most or practically all of us in the South China Sea area have already ratified it, except Chinese Taipei, or in that case, people are saying Taiwan, that have not or cannot ratify the Law of the Sea Convention so far. Now, of course, there are other UN Charter and so forth that are also relevant. And some of the people who are very much interested in the South China Sea and keep arguing, following the rule of law, actually are not party to the Law of the Sea Convention. This is the situation that is not very helpful in some cases, because they are not party to the Law of the Sea Convention, yet insisting on using the Law of the Sea Convention as one legal mechanism to solve this dispute. Now, in our experience within the last 20 years or so, first, of course, we have to define what are being claimed really in the South China Sea. Is it the claim to the sea as a whole, or is it the claim to the features, or is it the claim only to some resources, or what are being claimed, and what are the limits of those claims, and what are the basis for those claims? Now, in fact, this is not being very clearly identified by some of the claimants. The Philippines, for instance, claim on the basis of discovery, on the basis of proximity, on the basis of some continuity, contiguity, and so forth. But what does it mean in terms of practice is not very clearly indicated. Malaysia, of course, claim on the basis of economic zone and continental shelf, which is clearly or a little bit easier to identify. So did Brunei, and Vietnam is claiming it on the basis of history, basically, plus on the basis of the Law of the Sea Convention. That is the right to continental shelf and the right to economic zone and so forth. Now, the Chinese and Chinese Taipei have very similar claim that is basically based on this historical 9-dash line and so forth. But we have been asking in the past, what is the meaning of those 9-dash lines, but we don't get the answer. In fact, Indonesia is probably one country that did send a diplomatic note to China asking what does it mean, and the only answer that we get is, don't worry, we have no problem with Indonesia. And that is the way why we continue to proceed with the managing potential conflict in the South China Sea and so forth. And all those kind of claims which is not very identified. But we have been motivated in the Law of the Sea Convention by rules of the Law of the Sea Convention, particularly on Article 121, dealing with the regime of islands, the differentiation between island and rocks, and what islands can have, what rocks can have, and so forth. We are motivated by that. And the regime of Article 122 and 23, in the sense that we regard South China Sea as a semi-enclosed sea, and therefore there are obligations, four obligations in the convention to deal with the semi-enclosed seas like the South China Sea. One, to manage and cooperate the living resources through some kind of coordination or policy between the littoral countries. Second, to cooperate on marine scientific research. The third one, to cooperate on environmental protection. And the fourth one is to invite, as necessary, as appropriate, the Law of the Sea Convention said, other interested parties to work with them. All these kind of provision we did employ in the past. Now, the next problem that we face is, who are the littoral states really in the South China Sea? For instance, is Cambodia a littoral state? Or Laos a littoral state? Or for that matter, Thailand is a littoral state of the South China Sea? Or even Myanmar is a littoral state in the South China Sea? Why this is significant? Because these countries signed Declaration of Conduct with China. So they are making a situation where they are interested parties, at least, in the South China Sea by signing the Declaration of Conduct with China in 2002. While in fact, they are not in the South China Sea as such. On the other hand, Taiwan, which is in the South China Sea, do not sign the Declaration of Conduct with ASEAN or with members of the ASEAN countries and so forth, for political reasons. These are issues that complicate the situation a little bit in trying to move forward, in trying to move on the South China Sea countries and so forth. Now, are other countries which are not in the South China Sea but do have specific interests, are they the parties to the dispute? They are not the parties, But they are interested in the dispute. They are interested in solving the dispute, like, let's say, India, Japan, China, Australia, the US, Russia, and so forth. They are not in the South China Sea. But because they have specific interest there, they do have interest in preserving peace and stability in the South China Sea. Now, how to solve this? There are a lot of legal instruments for that one. The Law of the Sea Convention provides some legal instrument. Either you go to the court, you go to negotiate, you go to arbitration, and so forth. Those are the things that need to be employed. But I think what I like to say more is, what do we do outside of these problems as a result of so many conflicting interests and so forth? We tried to organize the South China Sea workshop in '89. And I'm very happy to see that Ian Townsend is here, because we cooperate at the time with Canada in trying to move forward on this issue. Ted McDormand was also active in many kind of the meetings of the South China Sea workshop. And at that time, we devised 3 mechanisms to deal with the South China Sea issues, that up to now we continue to respect that. One, to devise cooperative programs in which everyone can participate there in the South China Sea, whether you are claimant, you are non-claimant, you are a state, you are an entity or whatever, but we devise cooperative program so that everyone can participate, including China, including Taiwan, and including all the other littoral countries. In fact, now this cooperative program already included also all the 10 ASEAN countries, although they are not in the South China Sea as such. As I said, because they have signed the Declaration of Conduct in 2002. That's the first one. I'll tell more about that later on. The second one is to encourage the parties concerned to solve their own problems, which is bilateral in nature. We were encouraged, for instance, by Viet Nam and China, agreed on the limitation in the Beibu Bay, in Tonkin Bay. We are encouraged, for instance, Thailand, China and Vietnam to find out solution to the fisheries issues in the Beibu Bay by creating some kind of a joint development for fisheries management in certain areas of the South China Sea. That's what we are trying to do. And the third one is we encourage the development of confidence building process. That is, for instance, not to occupy new reefs, not to send more military establishment, military installation to the area, and so forth. Also, the result has not been very successful in that context. Now, how do we work? We work through 6 kind of mechanisms within the last 23 years. First, we discuss political and security issues. But my experience was that any time you talk about political and security issues, you got stuck. You didn't go anywhere with discussion on these issues. It's like banging your head on the wall, and you don't make much progress on discussing these political security issues. It's becoming more difficult when you talk about territorial and jurisdictional issues. We have talked about that since 1990, and still we don't go very far with that one on territorial security issues. But we do make progress on marine scientific research, the third one, and we are making progress on marine and environmental protection, some progress on safety of navigation, and also some progress on mechanism for cooperation. That even though Canada has stopped supporting the workshop for the last 10 years, but we continue to do because we have found out a mechanism for continuation of the cooperative program that we all agree. Now, let me say, 2 more minutes. Now, let me just say very quickly, out of this, I have walked out and say in many forums, they need to follow up 9 steps forward. And I hope that you will consider this also. First one, continue to devise cooperative programs. Like our chairman was saying today, maybe we should develop cooperative program on disaster management as a result of this typhoon that are killing people. Thousands of people have been killed in the Philippines and coming to Vietnam and coming to China and so forth. Maybe we should continue to do that, devising cooperative program. The second one is some program that we have agreed upon has been sort of delayed. So we should implement those programs as soon as we can. The third one is seek a solution in which ASEAN should encourage the non-claimant ASEAN to encourage the four claimant ASEAN to talk with non-ASEAN claimants in order to find out some kind of a solution to the territorial dispute. Now, we have not done that very much yet so far. The fifth one is we should encourage the continuation of the conclusion of the code of conduct between ASEAN and China, and perhaps at some moment also later on, I don't know how to do that with Taiwan and so forth. How do we encourage this conclusion of joint declaration on code of conduct? Please mindful, Ian will tell us that, if possible, in 1991, we have already drafted the Bandung Declaration and we agreed. China and Taiwan was participating there of 6 major points for the joint declaration. It took 11 years for those points to become declaration of conduct in 2002. Now, hopefully, after 12 years from 2002 now, the Declaration of Conduct could become a code of conduct in order ASEAN could make progress of that one. The sixth one is that the ASEAN countries should settle, the relevant parties in the South China Sea should settle their own maritime dispute, which is bilateral in nature. Don't bring it into South China Sea process if you can settle it bilaterally of your own bilateral issues like Viet Nam and China in the Bay of Tonkin and so forth. The seventh one is that the workshop process should continue. We have been doing it for 23 years and we all agree to continue it. The eighth one, two more. We should develop some rule of engagement in the South China Sea so that it will not create problems in the area. And the last one is that this is most difficult, and I like to say this with a lot of carefulness, that non-South China Sea country should be helpful in the sense like in facing to this disaster management and so forth, but they should also be very careful not to be accused of meddling too much and thus complicating the issues that are not helpful in some cases on this one. And be very clever in managing this kind of balance between the need to be helpful, but the need to be not to be accused of meddling too much in this kind of situation. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry it takes so much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. A lot of things that you can talk, but our session is allocated very short time. So I'd like to give floor to Dr. Wilfredo.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to express my appreciation to the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for this opportunity to significantly enrich my perspective and knowledge about the South China Sea issue from leading international specialists. The views I shall express, of course, are purely based on personal analysis and do not reflect the position of my government, from which I have retired last year. Moreover, this presentation is just the preliminary draft, having been notified only 3 days ago that I shall be a speaker here. So it has room for improvement. My premise is that the Association of Southeast Asian Nations will play a critical role in the management and eventual resolution of the South China Sea dispute. This is not a preconceived conviction on my part, nor wishful thinking. Rather, it is based on my 5 years of first-hand experience working in ASEAN as Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN and later as permanent representative to ASEAN. All ASEAN member states, I learned, share enough common interests that prevail over varying degrees of attachments to competing powers in the region. The structure, institutions, and the negotiation process within ASEAN are resilient enough to withstand external pressures. Moreover, domestic political dynamics and economic imperatives within societies of every member states necessitate constant adjustments in dealings with each other as well as with extra-regional powers. It is not correct to say that ASEAN never takes a position on critical issues, especially those that involve its members. There have been strong positions taken, but these are not announced in press conferences. But there have always been attempts to reconcile, if not resolve, issues in backroom internal negotiations. The arduous road that we exerted in encouraging and supporting liberalization in Myanmar is a case in point, and it is one of the achievements, though not broadcast publicly by ASEAN. Moreover, societies, economies, and governments of the dialogue partners themselves moreover, within the societies, economies, and governments of the dialogue partners themselves, problems have arisen that require gradual changes in their approaches towards ASEAN neighbors and fellow dialogue partners, and their attitudes towards the South China Sea. In other words, ASEAN does not exist in a vacuum. But despite differences that are sometimes externally induced, the member states are aware of their dominant and overarching interests as a regional grouping, and of the limitless possibilities and increasing collective capability that continue to shape their common destiny. They all know that it would be foolhardy to surrender these opportunities. No one wants a protracted dispute, much less an armed conflict, accidental or deliberate, to erupt in the South China Sea. Such a tragic eventuality will block access to one of the most important shipping lanes in the world, the Malacca Strait, and will disastrously impede the envisaged integration, connectivity, and growth of the economies of East Asia, the fastest growing region in the world. The arms race will further escalate in the region, and foreign bases may have to be set up in territories of reluctant, defenseless countries, thus violating the ASEAN treaties on the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapons Free Zone, or SHONFES, and the Treaty on the Zone of Peace, Freedom, and Neutrality, SOPFAN. No one will therefore benefit from a divided ASEAN. No intra-regional nor extra-regional player would want that scenario. It is not true that the strained relations between some ASEAN states and China are rooted in permanently conflicting core interests and incompatible cultures. In my 40 years as a professor of international relations, I think Mark Valencia has also that number of years of teaching, I have come to realize that not only are there no permanent friends nor permanent enemies, there are also no permanent interests. We can find the validity of this maxim in the various examples throughout the millennia of human history, including in recent times. A starting point in diffusing the tension that now characterizes between China and some ASEAN states is to examine why mutual perceptions or misperceptions are existing. As we know, the goodwill that China had built since it became as an ASEAN dialogue partner in 1996 had been adversely affected by its submission to the United Nations of the 9-dash line map, as well as by the Scarborough Shoal occupation. These incidents have unfortunately portrayed China as a serious threat to the security of the region and created deep apprehensions not only among the ASEAN claimant states, but also among neighboring countries, both within and outside ASEAN. On the part of China, its view of the Philippines is colored by the Philippines' association with the United States. Its perception that the U.S. pivot to Asia was aimed at containing China as a rising power has exacerbated the latter's unfair suspicion that the Philippines is an instrument in implementing the U.S. policy of containment. Chinese media has persistently depicted the Philippines as a pawn of the United States, instructed to make trouble in the South China Sea. But ours is a small country wrestling with so many difficulties: poverty, corruption, natural disasters. You have seen the horrible consequences of the strongest typhoon in world history. The last thing we want is to fight with China. And we cannot fight China. We are now compelled to purchase military equipment instead of using our meager resources to help solve our social and economic problems. And all because of the over-assertiveness of our giant northern neighbor, which we used to consider as our friend. Our Chinese friends always say that embedded in the national psyche of their people is the century of humiliation, exploitation that they suffered at the hands of colonial powers. Given our common experience in colonialism, we Filipinos expected that the risen China would be magnanimous and sympathetic to its close neighbor, true to the Confucian tradition of the eldest big brother being protective and caring towards his small brother. But the recent incidents in the South China Sea have struck fear in our hearts and have led many to ask, is China the new colonial power that threatens to victimize the people of Southeast Asia and, in the future, the people of the world? Now, I was given already the notice that my time is up. I would like to elaborate on these issues that I presented during the question and answer period. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Doctor. And I have to thank all the 4 panelists. We don't have much time. It's about 30-35 minutes for Q&A. So I think I will not, because you all listen to our panelists. I don't want to wrap up or do anything, but I now open the floor for further comment, question, and answer. And as usual, please raise your hand, introduce your name before starting raising question. Floor is open for all.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ying-Hui Song from Academia Sinica. Very simple question to our panelists. Is there any ASEAN version of the Code of Conduct? And does China prepare a draft of COC? Because in this early 2014, Thailand will be the host to have the 7th SOM and the 10th Joint Working Group on implementation of the DOC. So that's my two simple questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, on this COC, my feeling is that China slowly move on to the COC, although my understanding is that they have said they are not in a hurry. Now, I take it they are not opposed to it, but that may mean we will take time. And I think we have to learn also that dealing with China, you need a lot of patience also. This is the lesson that I have learned in the past. I keep saying, of course, you know, Professor Song, China philosophy of 1,000 miles start with the first step. Sometimes I find the first step is too small. That takes you quite a long time to reach the 1,000 miles. Now, I just hope that I have said also a couple of times that the step should be a little bit bigger than what we have seen so far. But I'm optimistic that maybe in due time that can be arrived at. Now, the problem that would be arising there is, how do we ask the others to come into this process? That is the issue. As I was indicating, the 10 ASEAN are members of the workshop process, and the 10 ASEAN signed declaration of conduct with China. And now we are going to transform them into some kind of conduct. But maybe I should ask you a question, Professor Song. Does it mean that Taiwan or Chinese Taipei, who does not sign the declaration of conduct or cannot sign declaration of conduct, feel bound by it or not? Just like Chinese Taipei does not sign the Law of the Sea Convention for political reason, do they feel bound by the Law of the Sea Convention or not?
Thank you, Ambassador.
I would think that they do, but I don't know. I know the answer. You should answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Leszek Buszyński from the ANU. I was very interested in Wilfredo Villacorte's comments, his characterization of China as the new colonial power and so forth. My question is, given what you have said today, do you see the Philippines becoming disillusioned with the whole ASEAN process, in which case can we envision a rollback in terms of Philippine thinking, more detachment from ASEAN, more reliance upon the United States, in which case, if that indeed would be so, what we're saying about ASEAN unity would have to be qualified significantly, also about ASEAN neutrality. We would see the development of major fissures in this organization. And much would depend upon the Philippine behavior in future years in that respect. What is your response?
Thank you very much. The Philippines is not disappointed with ASEAN. On the contrary, we are aware of our responsibility as a founding member of ASEAN, one of the 5 founding members of ASEAN in 1967, and we have contributed so much of our dreams, of our resources, of our time towards the development of ASEAN to what it is now. In fact, we were the first to propose the idea of an ASEAN Charter during the first 10 years of ASEAN. So we believe in ASEAN, and despite what seems to be certain disappointments, and we know who is responsible for that, the Philippines maintains its full confidence in ASEAN. And that's not a diplomatic statement that has empirical basis. Secondly, this is something that, because of time constraint, I was not able to talk about. But it has been raised by many other speakers in the first panel, the attempt to isolate the Philippines. On the surface, the country that tried to do that seemed successful, but it is mistaken. We are still solid as a regional grouping. And why not? It will be terribly foolhardy for us to squander the achievements, the limitless possibilities that are before us, just so we can fully avail of the benefits accruing from cooperation with any extra-regional power, whether in the form of loans, trade, or some other largesse. Because we know that the future of ASEAN is not just to be a conglomeration of countries with separate interests, but one solid bloc, more than what the European Union is now. And we can be, by ourselves, a superpower bloc that can make its contribution to the development of the world. So our allies are not just Viet Nam and the other claimant states. All the others are our close colleagues. And let us remember, there might be some predispositions on the part of leadership in a few member states that appear to run against the interest of the Philippines and those other claimants with us. But let us recall that leaders come and go. And even if there's no regime survival on the part of the present regimes, they change too. The regime of China has not changed. It's still run by the Communist Party of China. But look at the big difference between Mao Zedong. The first time I visited China was the tail end of the Cultural Revolution. And I have visited China under Hu Jintao just 2 years ago. And oh, by the way, now too, I just came back from China. The big difference, the same regime, but different orientations. And now, President Xi Jinping gathered last October 24th to 25th in Beijing this conference with the Communist Party Central Committee, and as well as the heads of the different departments in China, different ministries, and also the People's Liberation Army and the Navy and other officials, telling them about the importance of good neighborliness with peripheral countries. I was told by a Chinese friend, we don't call it peripheral because it gives the wrong impression that you know, the Middle Kingdom and all that. No. The right term, they said, is neighboring countries. But according to our China specialist, Mr. Santa Romana, there is the same word in Chinese to describe both periphery and neighboring surrounding. So in any event, I am very optimistic about that. It is said that we cannot judge the present and future behavior of countries based on their words, based on their rhetoric. But this time I think China is beginning to reconsider the adverse effects of its 9-dash line and its transgressions, not only in the Philippines but Vietnam and other parts. And the ASEAN member states are awakening to that. Even Cambodia and Laos and Myanmar, which are considered to be very close to China, are beginning. They're not going to say this publicly. Leaders come and go. We must not forget. So look at where Vietnam is now. After the Vietnam War, Vietnam now is very close to the United States. Interests change. It's not just friends and enemies that change, but interests change. So that is my response to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Can I have another next question? This one first. Okay, you wait for the microphone, please.
This is Stein Tønneson, Peace Research Institute, Oslo, Norway. One question for Dr. Emmers and one for Dr. Villacorta.
Thank you, all speakers, for the enlightening information. During your presentation, I know that you emphasize the importance of ASEAN unity in the South China Sea dispute settlement. I realized it, but my question is, do you find any most challenge, challenge of the unity of ASEAN? Where does it come from? From concept of sovereignty or from concept of non-involvement in South China Sea dispute? And if yes, so do you think there is any rationality in the concept of non-involvement in South China Sea dispute of some ASEAN countries, given to their signature of dog and given to the interest of the unity ASEAN community in the future?
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting one. But I'll tell you another one so we can answer together. Please, you continue.
So one question to Dr. Emmers and one to Dr. Villacorta. Dr. Emmers, you divided the ASEAN countries into active claimants, passive claimants, worried or concerned non-claimants, and passive non-claimants. We saw that when a passive non-claimant had the chairmanship, things did not go very well, and a concerned non-claimant had to save the picture. And then it turned to a passive claimant and things went pretty well. Now next year it's going back to a passive non-claimant. Will that mean that we will have a repetition of the problems? And my question to Dr. Villacorta is about the consistency and coordination of Philippines policies. We saw in 2005 the Philippines enter into a joint marine seismic undertaking, and then 3 years later withdrawing from it, and it became a matter of internal Philippines politics. Can you hear what I'm saying from here?
Thank you.
No, the question was not over. The reason why I'm asking the question about the coordination of Filipino policies is that the Philippines is likely to be put under very tough pressure from China to withdraw the case for the arbitral tribunal. And China will use both carrots and sticks. And what we have seen lately is that when the question of the cement blocks, these are things in the paper from Carlisle Thayer this morning, that statements made by the President and the Foreign Minister and the Minister of Defense are contradicting each other. And the Philippines made false accusations against China in this case, where one should think that the Philippines should know if such cement blocks had been there for a long time, or if they were new. So is there an improvement in the Philippines in terms of coordinating its policies so that it can be consistent and defend the Philippines' national interest?
Thank you for the question. I have to do some labor division among the panelists. The first question of Mr. Ralf to it.
Sure. I'll take the two questions together. So starting with the gentleman, what is the greatest challenge to ASEAN unity? So just to reiterate my key point, the ASEAN unity is based on a pretty straightforward formula, which is we don't talk about sovereignty, we talk about trying to set up a conflict management mechanism in place, which guarantees good order at sea, both with China and the 10 Southeast Asian countries. I would argue that the greatest challenge is actually a larger issue, which is divergent strategic outlooks in Southeast Asia on two key questions. One, how do you perceive the rise of China? Do you perceive it as a threat or do you perceive it as an opportunity? Secondly, the role of other external powers, especially the United States. Some countries would argue they're welcomed in the region and they need to contribute to peace and stability. Others would beg to disagree on this point. So it's this convergence of strategic outlooks, but this has been true since 1967. This is not in any way a new development. It's just that in this particular case, it's being applied to the South China Sea situation. But we saw it earlier on already in different contexts. To Professor Donnison's question, I never actually put one and one together, but the way you phrased it is actually quite convincing. So if I were to do horizon scanning, I would probably assume that Myanmar will pay less attention to the South China Sea next year than Brunei did over the last 12 months, and for a very obvious reason. One is a claimant country, the other one is not. Hence, why would you go the extra mile to perhaps upset a country that can greatly contribute to your economic development to focus on a matter on which you ultimately have no immediate stake? So I wouldn't go as far as to say that what will happen in Myanmar next year will be a repetition of what happened in Cambodia, because there is no way that I could make that claim. I have absolutely no idea whether that will be true or not. But it is fair, I think, to assume that Myanmar will pay less attention to the South China Sea in its chairmanship than Brunei did.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, just to briefly answer the first question about the Philippines not informing the other claimant states, right? Well, that's the difficulty in being a former ambassador. There are certain things we cannot really talk about, especially during my incumbency as ambassador. But I'd like to tell you that you may think that we did not inform, but there's a possibility that we did inform, but we did not announce it to the press. I said a possibility, okay? Now, so please do not condemn us for not informing our partners. Maybe you can ask our partners what they know. Now, Professor Tanasan, you talked too fast for me, if you don't mind. Can you repeat your statement about we withdrew in 2005? I'm sorry, I didn't get it. Yeah.
My impression of Philippines' behavior in the South China Sea is that it is erratic and inconsistent.
Yes.
Because there is a shift, there are rapid shifts. And we also see from Carlisle Thayer's paper earlier today that the Secretary of Defense the Secretary of Foreign Affairs and the
Yes.
President make different kinds of statements right
Yes.
after each other when it
Yes.
comes to Scarborough Shoal.
Yes.
So my question is something being done to ensure more consistency
Yes.
in Philippines policy so that it can handle the pressure that China will put on the Philippines to withdraw the case for the arbitral tribunal?
I got that part of your question, but the first one, you cited an example in which we committed something and we withdrew. I don't get it.
That was the joint marine seismic undertaking between Philippines, China and Vietnam
All
in
right.
2005, where first the Philippines went for it
Yes.
and then afterwards withdrew. Also an example of erratic
Oh, that
behavior.
that one. Okay. So I'll answer both. Inconsistency. Well, first of all, no government is perfect, right? Especially where you have regular changes in the presidency or head of government, then there would be this tendency. Even the United States experienced that. Bush to Obama, so on. Now, with respect to that one, the trilateral agreement among China, the Philippines, and Vietnam for exploration, not actual exploration, but doing research. Well, it was discontinued because, well, it's public anyway. There was some irregularities in the agreement involving the former president. Now, I would not want to elaborate on that because that will take up the whole rest of the afternoon to explain that. But to make the story short, first, I think that the court considered it difficult to defend constitutionally. Number two, when the new president came to power in 2010, then all these agreements were abrogated for national interest reasons. So it is not inconsistency. Well, consistency on the surface, but please understand, and I'm sure you do, coming from a liberal democratic country, that where there's changes in leadership, there are also changes in policy. Then, secondly, the mistake about the construction of concrete blocks, which was supposed to lead to structures that will fortify Chinese control over the Scarborough Shoal. There was a mistake, and we should, in fact, applaud our president for having the honesty to publicly say that it was not true. In fact, I think China appreciated that. And it's not inconsistency, it's an admission of a mistake. It would have been worse, and it would have been condemned by the Filipino people and the international community if the president kept on insisting that there were illegal structures being set up by the Chinese.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Doctor. We don't have much time, so I'm going to take one more question from this side. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to address this, I think, to Ralf and also KAVI. What seems to be missing from this analysis, which is focusing on the South China Sea and individual ASEAN states, is the multilateral dimension of ASEAN's relations with China, which binds these countries to a large extent in many areas of cooperation. And isn't that to some extent mitigating against these doomsaying things that ASEAN unity, yet again in its 44-year history, is going to be upset by disunity rather than create more unity? We have a ASEAN security community about to be formed in late 2015, the ASEAN Charter coming in. I'm not saying these are perfect mechanisms, but don't they mitigate against the disunity that you've been talking about? And then finally, I would respectfully take offering a different point of view, that in my going to conferences where Myanmar diplomats are showing up and presenting on the South China Sea, they're highly informed. When asked privately, they will give this the highest priority. And in fact, whatever your bilateral focus is on China, the reforms in Myanmar which are finding resonance in support from the international community, the U.S., I think will be reinforced in Myanmar's view by playing a positive role of ASEAN chair and faithfully carrying out the duties to advance discussions on a code of conduct. Maybe not with the same authority as Brunei, but nowhere near even what Cambodia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope I understand your question right. I think Thailand terms will focus on what it can do the best while it serves as the coordinating country. And I think the sole purpose is to make sure that there is some progress. Beyond that, I don't think I can see any future plans, because Thailand is looking at least for the time being, make sure that China came in and push for progress. For example, now the focus for Thailand is to make sure that China would somehow accept ASEAN as a whole, try to come out with a statement which failed to come out last time at the summit meeting in Brunei. The statement that has been discussed a little bit. ASEAN wants China together to come up with a joint statement that South China Sea would become the sea of peace, friendship and cooperation. And I think if that can be done, it will set a very good stage for ASEAN-China relation. Now, ASEAN is moving on many other levels, as you can see. We have ASEAN's political and security community, which has 193 action plans, but ASEAN has not yet fulfilled or implemented as much as AEC, ASEAN Economic Community, not to mention other pillar which is focused on ASEAN cultural cooperation. If you put together all these things, I think it should be complement with each other. But ASEAN at the moment is not in the positions to do so. In the year 2010, in April, under Vietnam chair, Vietnam actually was the first one to think of the bargaining power of ASEAN by initiating discussion to form a metric of ASEAN's global position on a global issue. Since then, ASEAN has been looking, trying to identify issues that they will have a common position so that they can tell to the world that ASEAN centrality or unity is real. But ASEAN so far has not yet done so. So I think with the ASEAN community, ASEAN would continue to try as much to follow the plan of action. And for the Thai, they'll try very much to push on the COC. And then at the same time, a country like Myanmar will work very hard to make sure that U.S. engage, because Myanmar is a coordinating country for ASEAN-US. I think you look at it, sometimes you think that they act separately, but in a way, all these countries coordinating their views. Thailand will never be able to go ahead alone in the case of China. Bilaterally, Thailand can, and hopefully it can use whatever goodwill it generated so that ASEAN would be able to receive this kind of goodwill. I think that much is clear. But I don't know what would happen after the Thai chair, because China would want to use the remaining months, 20 months, to lay the strong groundwork so that it can proceed in the future without any further regression. That I would think, and the opportunity is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. KAVI. Our time is up. And the organizing committee wants us to conclude our section, and we also want to conclude our section because it's lunchtime. But I'm sure that the topic ASEAN and South China Sea will be revisited in the coming section, because when we are talking about major powers and South China Sea section, the leading role of ASEAN will be dealt with, and ASEAN activities, ASEAN neutralities between the superpowers, where it then takes sides or trying to find the way where to stand in the middle or on the other side. So I hope that our workshop will come back with the ASEAN and the South China Sea in the coming section. For that, I thank you all, thank the panelists and all the participants. Our meeting adjourns, and we say good afternoon.